Let's think about this for a second. Every item in your home, the fuel in your car, the food sitting in your fridge right now, chances are it spends some serious time on a maritime giant. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving straight into classification data directly from the Baltic Exchange to truly wrap our heads around the massive vessels powering the entire global economy.
To actually make sense of the maritime supply chain, we're going to use a sort of field guide. We'll be looking at 1. Bulk carriers, 2. Tankers, 3. Gas carriers, 4. Specialist vessels, and 5. Container vessels.
Now, before we start putting everything into neat little boxes, we really need to keep this vital quote from the Baltic Exchange in mind. Ship classifications are a living, evolving market practice. There aren't some ancient, static laws written in stone. As global demand shifts and engineering naturally improves, the definitions shift right along with them. So keep that constant evolution in the back of your mind as we go through the numbers.
Okay, Section 1. Bulk carriers moving the world's dry cargo.
These are the absolute workhorses moving dry, unpackaged goods. We're talking iron ore, coal, grain. Now, their capacity is measured in deadweight tonnage, or DWT. That's essentially the maximum weight of cargo, fuel, and crew a ship can safely carry. As these bulk carriers scale up, it gets really interesting. The smaller Handysize and Supermax ships are what we call geared, meaning they actually have their own onboard cranes. This is fantastic for versatility, right? Because they can unload themselves at smaller, less developed ports. But as you scale up to the massive Cape-size vessels, which can hold up to 200,000 deadweight tons across 9 massive holds, they become gearless. They have to rely entirely on massive, specialized port infrastructure just to load and unload all that cargo.
Just think about the sheer jumping capacity we see when we look at the big leagues. A standard Panamax, which was traditionally the largest ship that could squeeze through the old locks of the Panama Canal, maxes out around 82,500 tons. A Cape-size, which is literally so big it has to sail all the way around the Cape of Good Hope or Cape Horn, more than doubles that. And then you have the absolute behemoths.
The crucial takeaway here is that a single Chinamax, Valemax, or very large ore carrier can haul an awe-inspiring maximum of 400,000 deadweight tons of cargo. To put that insane number into perspective, that is roughly the weight of over 1,000 fully loaded Boeing 747 airplanes. It is just staggering to imagine that much weight on a single haul.
Moving on to Section 2. Tankers, transporting oil and chemicals. Think of these as floating pipelines responsible for safely transporting the world's liquid commodities. Just like bulk carriers, tankers are also measured in deadweight tonnage, but they have their own distinct classifications. You start with your medium-range vessels, the MR1s and MR2s, and those typically distribute refined products over shorter routes. Then, you scale up to the Aframax and the Suezmax. The Suezmax, as you might guess from the name, is historically the maximum-size ship capable of transiting the Suez Canal fully loaded, usually maxing out around 160,000 deadweight tons.
Now here is a super interesting quirk. A single physical engineering feature can change a market classification entirely. Normally, if you have a Panamax or an Aframax tanker, it hauls raw crude oil. But if that exact same size of vessel happens to have specially coated tanks, boom, it earns the designation of LR1 or LR2, long range 1 or 2. Those coated tanks are an absolute game changer because they prevent contamination, allowing the ship to carry expensive refined products like jet fuel or gasoline instead of just raw crude. But when we are talking about raw crude, the undisputed giants of the liquid category are the Very Large Crude Carriers, or VLCCs. These are massive floating storage tanks capable of holding up to 320,000 deadweight tons of crude oil, safely navigating the deepest ocean routes to power global refineries.
Next up, Section 3, gas carriers, measuring volume in CBM.
Okay, for gas carriers, we actually have to completely shift our mental metric from weight to sheer volume. And in this market, it's incredibly important to split the category into 2 very distinct types of cargo. First, we have liquefied petroleum gas, or LPG, which includes gases like propane and butane. These ships use thick, pressurized or semi-refrigerated tanks, with the largest maxing out just over 60,000 cubic meters. But then we have liquefied natural gas, or LNG. LNG has to be super cooled down to a freezing minus 162 degrees Celsius. And because of the massive energy demand worldwide, LNG requires vastly larger conventional ships. The scaling of the LNG fleet is literally explosive. We step up from small-scale ships used for regional distribution all the way through the lower and upper conventional sizes.
But the real showstoppers are the Q-Flex and the Q-Max. The Q actually stands for Qatar because these highly specialized vessels were custom built to maximize the export of natural gas straight from Qatari terminals to the rest of the world.
To really grasp this scale, a Q-Max LNG carrier boasts a volume exceeding 220,000 cubic meters. That is literally enough natural gas to heat tens of thousands of homes through an entire winter, all contained in supercooled, highly insulated tanks on a single ship. Just a true marvel of modern engineering.
Moving right along to Section 4, Specialist Vessels, Multi-Purpose and Adaptive Logistics.
Of course, not all global trade fits neatly into a giant bulk hold or a liquid tank, and the sheer variety of specialized ships is amazing. You have OO and OBO vessels, oil, bulk, and ore. These are brilliant because they can carry dry iron ore on one leg of a journey and then pump crude oil into those exact same adaptable holds for the return trip, completely eliminating the inefficiency of an empty voyage. You've got multi-purpose tween-deckers for mixed cargo. You have reefers, which are essentially massive floating refrigerators, keeping our international meat and produce fresh as they cross the equator. And then you have the ROROs, the roll-on, roll-off ships, and pure car and truck carriers. I mean, these are literally enclosed, multi-story floating parking garages that drive the global automotive supply chain. Whatever the niche demand is, there's a specialized ship built perfectly to match it.
And finally, Section 5, Container Vessels, the box that changed the world.
This is the logistical backbone of consumer goods. Seriously, everything from your electronics to your sneakers is moved in these standardized steel boxes. Because of that, this entire fleet relies on a metric called TEU, or 20-foot equivalent units. One standard 20-foot container equals 1 TEU. Now, this category has seen relentless, almost aggressive growth over the last few decades. A traditional Panamax carried up to about 5,200 boxes. But as global consumerism just exploded, shipbuilders had to push past the original limits of the Panama Canal, creating post-Panamax and then neo-Panamax vessels to fit the newly expanded canal locks, pushing up to 14,500 TEU. And wild enough, even that wasn't enough, which pushed the industry straight into very large and ultra-large territory.
The jump in capacity we see at the top end is staggering. The Neo-Panamax was already considered a modern engineering triumph, right? But when a vessel finally earns the title of ultra-large container ship, it makes the Neo-Panamax look almost modest in comparison.
At the absolute top of the food chain, an ultra-large container ship, or a ULCS, can carry up to 23,000 20-foot containers on a single voyage. Just to visualize that, if you loaded all those containers onto semi-trucks and lined them up bumper to bumper, the traffic jam would stretch for over 85 miles. And we are talking about just one single ship.
So, having explored the sheer, mind-bending scale of these vessels through this explainer, we are left with a pretty fascinating reality. The Baltic Exchange classifications we've dug into today are already having to expand to accommodate new, ever larger classes of ships. It really leaves you wondering, exactly how large will the next generation of megaships need to be to keep our globalized world moving? Is there a hard, physical limit to the draft our ports can handle, or the width our straits and canals can accommodate? Because as consumer demand rises, the leviathans of the sea will surely keep growing. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep your eyes on the horizon.